Depth Dive. Today, we're kind of flipping the script on a very modern idea. You know, we live in this world that's constantly pushing us to move on, look ahead, right? Don't dwell on the past.
Absolutely. Forward, always forward.
But what if? What if the best way to actually build hope, find direction for your future, isn't about forgetting? What if it's about intentionally looking back?
That's the core of it, isn't it?
Yeah, so we're diving into this reflection called Remember, Hope, Obey. It's centered on, well, a really ancient text, Psalm 78, verses 1 through 8.
A classic.
And our mission really is to explore how remembering past faithfulness, how that isn't just, nostalgia, how it's maybe a practical way to build resilience and guide your steps now.
And that's such a key point. The source material really asks us to resist that relentless push forward for just a minute.
Right. Slow down.
Slow down and reflect. It frames it as meeting something, profound in this ancient wisdom, not just history, but principles that are still incredibly relevant. It's about understanding how those old patterns can actually build a kind of, maybe an internal trust blueprint for whatever's coming next.
A trust blueprint. I like that. Okay, so let's unpack this ancient mandate then. Psalm 78.1-8, it starts with this really urgent call.
Yeah, it grabs you.
Give ear, O my people, to my teaching. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. It's so direct, demanding focus.
Definitely. No ambiguity there.
And then it gets even more specific. We will not hide them from their children, but tell to the coming generation the glorious deeds of the Lord and his might and the wonders that he has done.
And that part, not hide them,
yeah,
that really jumps out. It's an active command to share.
Exactly. It's not passive.
And what's fascinating is how explicit that generational thing becomes, linking back to that trust blueprint idea you mentioned.
Right.
The song goes on, he established a testimony in Jacob and appointed a law in Israel, which he commanded our fathers to teach to their children, that the next generation might know them, the children yet unborn, and arise and tell them to their children.
Wow. So it's a chain.
It's absolutely a chain. It's not just sharing facts like dates and events. It's passing on lived experience, understanding, wisdom, all through storytelling.
The power of story.
Exactly. It's building this collective memory bank of trust that stretches across time, past, present, future.
Why? Why go to all this trouble to remember and tell these stories? What's the point behind it all?
That's a good question.
Psalm 78, verse 7 seems to give us the answer, the core why, it says. So that they should set their hope in God and not forget the works of God, but keep his commandments.
There it is. Those three pillars.
Hope, remembering, obeying, all linked.
Right.
Right.
And when you put those three together, set their hope in God, not forget the works of God, and keep his commandments, you see this clear pathway emerging.
Okay.
The real insight here, I think, is that remembering past faithfulness. It's not about getting stuck in the past. It's about actively re-equipping yourself for the present and future.
Re-equipping? How so?
Well, it builds this kind of internal database. Evidence, really. Evidence that helps counteract today's worries. It shows that reliable help or guidance or whatever you want to call it, it wasn't random. It's part of a pattern.
A consistent character.
Exactly. Like reviewing a champion's past wins before a tough match. It fuels confidence.
Okay, I see that.
And that confidence, that renewed hope, that's what makes obedience possible. It encourages you to follow the instructions.
Yeah.
Because you trust the source. You've seen the track record.
Right. But couldn't someone argue, maybe, that focusing too much on past faithfulness might make you complacent? Like, it'll all just work out, so why bother trying or obeying now? Does looking back risk becoming a crutch?
That's a really fair question. And that's where the nuance is important. The text isn't suggesting just, passive nostalgia. It's an active recall. The whole point is to inform your present actions and inspire future hope.
Okay. Active, not passive.
Yeah. The hope it generates isn't about laziness. It's actually about courage. Courage to step forward now. Because when you remember how things worked out in the past, it often involved, tough situations and people needing to act, needing to trust.
Right. It wasn't always easy.
Definitely not. So it reminds you that while the underlying support might be consistent, the journey usually requires grit, trust, action. So it fuels hope for action, not as a replacement for it.
Okay, that makes sense. And this really highlights the clash with how we often think today, doesn't it?
Totally.
Our culture shouts, look ahead, move on, forget the past. But this psalm says, do the opposite, look back.
It feels really countercultural.
So how does looking back actually generate hope for the future? How does it avoid just being, well, getting stuck in yesterday.
Yeah, it does seem like a contradiction at first glance. But the source reflection is clear. This isn't about getting bogged down in history. It's about drawing real strength from it. So point 1, when we remember how God showed up before, it reminds us he's still capable, still working today. It gives you a foundation that that maybe goes deeper than your current feelings or circumstances.
So a deeper foundation.
But 2, when we actually tell others about those times, our stories from the past, we're essentially planting seeds of hope in their lives too, building up their trust blueprint.
Sharing the evidence.
Exactly. And 3rd, when we choose to obey, based on that remembered faithfulness, even when things feel shaky or uncertain, that act of obedience itself becomes an act of hope. It's trusting the pattern will hold.
So it connects past, present, and future action.
Right. It's not just recalling history. It's fueling present trust and shaping future expectation. You're actively participating in that pattern. And connecting this to the bigger picture, there's also a really important warning in Psalm 78. It's not all positive reinforcement.
Yes, the cautionary part.
Verse 8, it warns against becoming like past generations. And it says, and that they should not be like their fathers, a stubborn and rebellious generation, a generation whose heart was not steadfast, whose spirit was not faithful to God.
That's pretty strong language, stubborn and rebellious. How does just forgetting lead to something like active rebellion? Wouldn't it just lead to, I don't know, indifference?
That's a great point. Forgetting here isn't just like a passive lapse of memory. It's presented as something more active, or at least having active consequences.
Okay.
It erodes that foundation we talked about, that knowledge of past faithfulness. If you lose your connection to that trust blueprint, if you forget the patterns the times help arrived, you lose your anchor.
You're adrift.
Sort of.
Sure.
You start acting like you're the first person ever to face these kinds of problems without the benefit of past wisdom. And this spiritual amnesia, it leads directly to a lack of steadfastness, faithfulness, because there's no track record to lean on.
No evidence base.
Exactly. Without that evidence, trust just dissolves. And when trust goes, often the easiest path feels like relying only on yourself, or maybe even pushing back against guidance, defiance.
So you repeat the old mistakes.
You risk perpetuating those cycles of struggle, instead of building on past lessons. So remembering acts like a guardrail. It keeps you grounded in herb and points toward obedience by giving you that vital context.
This is all really practical, actually, which leads us to think about, applying this. The deep dive really prompts some personal questions.
It does.
So for you listening, let me take a second. What stories of God's faithfulness are you holding on to? What are those moments, maybe big, maybe small, where you saw that pattern show up in your own life? And then who around you needs to hear those stories? Who could use that bit of evidence right now? And maybe the biggest question, how can you live today in a way that shows you really believe it, that reflects your hope in a living God?
And maybe to make that even more concrete, try to pinpoint some specifics. What did faithfulness look like in that tough time or that unexpected help? What actually happened?
Get specific.
Yeah. And then think, who specifically could I share that particular story with this week? Imagine what it would feel like to live with that hope, not just as an idea, but like tangibly, letting your own trust blueprint guide your steps today.
So let's try and wrap this up. What's the big takeaway here? This deep dive into remember, hope, obey in Psalm 78. It seems to show this really deep, maybe countercultural link.
Definitely countercultural.
Remembering isn't just looking backward, it's actually the fuel for future hope. And it's the guide for how we act, how we obey right now.
Well put. They're not just nice ideas, they're practical tools for navigating life, the good parts and the hard parts. It's about actively building and then using that trust blueprint.
Yeah.
And maybe here's a final thought to chew on, something from the source material's closing reflection.
Okay.
God is not done writing your story, and he's worth trusting every step of the way. That kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? How could actively, intentionally recalling those moments of past faithfulness, how could that genuinely reshape your perspective now? How could it deepen your trust, not just about the past, but for those pages in your story that are still blank? The ones that feel maybe uncertain or even scary?
That's a powerful question to leave with. So we really invite you to take these reflections into your day. Think about how your own stories, the ones you remember, the ones you choose to share, how they can be a real source of hope for you and for the people around you.
Yeah.
Thanks for diving deep with us today.